everyone seems to be discussing whether or not the Scene 14 that we currently have is the original Scene 14 from our timeline. And that's a massive debate. There's arguments for basically every side now. As of Season of Dawn, it seemed fairly concrete, not that anybody questioned it, that the saint that we saved was the Scene 14 from our timeline. The reason that I sort of bring this up is because originally the first time travel we did with the Corridors of Time and the Sundial and everything was us going back in time to a very young Scene 14 who was helping colonists go to Mercury, it seemed, and Fallen attacked and killed them all basically, but we had to help him and then we give him the perfect paradox. And that seems to have been a thing which happened in our timeline, because the message which was originally left on the perfect paradox that we picked up from Scene 14's grave originally in Curse of Osiris was addressed to us. It was a message from Scene 14 to us, having suggested that it was, we'd given it to him, that we'd forged it in the Infinite Forge and all this sort of stuff, use sheer will and all this, and Ghost repeated this then to Saint whenever we time travelled. So it seems like that's a pretty established point in our timeline. So that happened. There's also the chance, I guess, that we time travelled to a different timeline, Scene 14, and did that. And that a different timeline version of us time travelled to our timeline and gave Scene 14 from our timeline their perfect paradox. And we basically just, I did a wee swap with another Arcadia from a different timeline. There's a chance that happened. Who knows? Basically, it seems like that's what happened, is that we time travelled properly the first time and given the perfect paradox and the whole's fine and dandy. The change was then that we saved his life by going and saving him before the martyr mind could drain his light properly. That seems to be the convergence point. Having said that, I would have said that's all fine and dandy, and at the time it seemed very much, not that anybody questioned it, that we time travelled, saved his life, and that was it, and he came along around out of the Infinite Forest. Seemed fine, but this act, we've sort of found that Saints and Osiris' memories of whenever they originally confessed their love for each other differ, which lends the theory to we timeline jumped to a different version of Saint and give him our perfect paradox, and a different version of our guardian did that to our Saint, which is very confusing to think about. But that's it, there's a chance that happened. But it basically seems like the Saint that we have isn't the right Saint, even though I feel like the intention whenever Season of Dawn happened was that we literally just time travelled. But currently it seems like Saint is from a different timeline. There is also the possibility that Osiris is from a different timeline, because he did build the sundial. I doubt that he's the only Osiris to have built the sundial. There could have been other timelines Osirises which did that, and he did spend an awful long time in the Infinite Forest. There's a chance that he's from a different timeline, and he's the outlier here. Anyway, that's not what I made the video about. Ikora this week suggested that Failsafe could literally just open a portal to the conductor's doorstep and we can walk out and shoot a rocket in her face. But in order to do that, we need to get information on the Vex. A lot of information on the Vex. Information which seemingly would be easiest claimed from the mind of the dead Scene 14 currently laid to rest in the Infinite Forest on Mercury. This all sounds fine and dandy in paper, and I haven't seen anybody dispute this plan on Reddit or YouTube or anything. I've been searching both websites. I find nothing other than the debate whether or not Saint is the correct Saint. There's a few slight spanners in this plan, which I feel like I need to point out because nobody else seems to have flagged this up. Maybe it's because it's too obvious, but if there's anything I've learned from Reddit, nothing's too obvious. So, there's a few issues. A, if we time travelled, Saint wouldn't have a grave because we changed his... we made him not die. To us, we would still remember that he died and would remember his grave, but he didn't actually die in this timeline anymore, therefore his grave wouldn't exist. Let's ignore that. B, even if that is the case, the martyr mind was said to have been unique. It was keyed specifically to Saint's light frequency. Having said that, another timeline Saint will probably have the same frequency of light, but still, there was only one mind made. And if that is the case, we killed the mind before it then managed to drain Saint's light. How does that exactly work, and how would that have led to another Saint dying? Don't know. There's a chance that the mind literally has hopped around realities and started killing Saints, but I highly doubt that. C, even if we ignore that, there's a bit of a more glaring issue in that we don't have Mercury. It's not in the solar system anymore. It hasn't been that way for 4 years, I think. The only planets that have been returned out of the 4 which originally were taken by the Witness are Titan and Mars. Mars was returned by Savathun seemingly as part of her big plot to get her memories back after becoming a light bearer, and Titan just came back. I don't really know what happened there. I don't even know if that's been established, but it came back. Maybe that was a Ziva or Wrath plan. But either way, we only have 2 planets currently. Io and Mercury aren't back, and as of the most recent lore we have about this, which seems to have came from the Final Shapes Collector's Edition, is that right before the Final Shape, the expansion, right before that happened, Mercury and Io still weren't back. They were still gone, missing, taken. I highly doubt that killing the Witness will have magically returned these planets, especially because I feel like it would have been mentioned at least in some sort of offhand lore tab somewhere, but it hasn't as far as I can find from my scrollings of the internet and from what I've seen personally in the game. There's been no mention of this. So to our knowledge, currently Mercury doesn't exist in the game, or even in the Destiny universe, and it's been taken still. This means that we possibly have the biggest glaring story mishap in the history of the game, but I highly doubt that because they're typically very consistent. So there's a few options for what can happen next week. I'm under the impression that we're going to go into the Infinite Forest, find Saint's dead corpse, get his memory, give it to Failsafe so she can open a portal to the Conductor. I don't think we'll do that like next week, go to the Conductor, but I think we'll give her the information. So I think that'll happen. There's a few ways this can happen. I think it's most likely we'll find a different door into the Infinite Forest that is on Nessus. I think potentially the Infinite Forest works similar to the Pyramidion. Pyramidion was basically a space which existed somewhere, and there was doors into it on different planets. Io was one of those planets. When you went into the Pyramidion on Io, the Pyramidion, to my knowledge, wasn't actually on Io. It was somewhere else. You just went through a door which got you there. That was how I understand it. To my knowledge, the Infinite Forest is actually on Mercury. Like, Mercury is basically the computer which runs the Infinite Forest, I think. But there's still a possibility there's a door or portal into it on different planets. Sort of like remotely connecting to a different computer, if that helps at all. Maybe that only helps me, I don't know. But there's a chance that exists. So there's a chance, I would say it's a good chance, that we basically find a portal on Nessus which brings us to the Infinite Forest, and the Conductor maybe set it up, or I don't know, maybe it's really deep in Nessus and that's why we haven't found it before. I think that'll probably happen. The other option is Mercury randomly appears. Yay! Mercury came back randomly in the middle of an act. The other option is that we spend basically 4 steps next week trying to get Mercury back. We do it successfully, which I highly doubt. And then we just nip in for a wee picnic and find Saint. But that feels like it's an entire episode as opposed to a 4-step thing in the middle of an act. So who knows? But that's my current issue. So I've not seen anybody actually talk about this. Mercury currently is still taken. We don't have any way of getting it back, probably without involving Savathun. So who knows? But that's my current issue. Also, I know somebody's going to bring it up at some stage. Trials does involve the lighthouse on Mercury. That doesn't mean Mercury is back, because it's been confirmed that that's a simulation. Ever since Mercury was taken, the Trials lighthouse is a simulation. It's the same way crystal maps and gamut maps work on planets which don't exist currently, is that they're simulations. So that can be used as evidence. So yeah, let me know what you think. Maybe this is just obvious to people, but I think it's a pretty glaring issue and nobody seems to have talked about it. So anyway, that's about it. I hope you've enjoyed. Please consider leaving a like, maybe even subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.